It's Monday, the 1st of July, 2024. Start of a new month, start of a new quarter, start of a new week. Everything happening today. And yeah, a really nice move to talk about, first of all. So, Bitcoin. If you had been paying attention over, like, first of all, let's cover this. So last week, I made a little prediction. Now, this is something that I shared basically with the crew and spoke about on the live stream. So I gave like my full analysis for this. But essentially saying that I was expecting like the rest of last week to remain in just a range between the value area low of the entire range and the monthly level. And that's basically essentially what we did. We had a small deviation on Friday night that took us for a few hours just below that monthly level. But overall, we were staying within that range. And then we were looking for this weekend pump to take out the Monday highs and to give people a CME gap to temp shorts, and potentially then, if I get my head out of the way, a squeeze to 67k before we start to drop back down and just start to chill out again within this range. And this is very similar to what we've seen. So it was a bit of a, just like I said, like magical prediction, but there was reason for believing that this would be the case. We obviously were starting a new quarter. We were ending an old quarter, starting a new one. So it's unlikely that we're going to get big moves until we start this new quarter off. And of course, when you get that build up into it, like we had overnight there. So yeah, a really decent move here. And if we just zoom in and take a look at this, first of all, this is essentially what I was talking about, right? So we had our range value area low, right, which was here. Okay, and then we had our monthly level, which was here. And we were just looking at this range to continue playing for the rest of the week. Now, what we saw afterwards was, I believe, like when you actually take out the wick and you're using this as basically any invalidation for longs right now, then what we essentially had was this is a deviation below the range lows. And it did actually come into what was, I think, on the 1 hour. It was also single prints, but you also had this little 1 hour gap here. So you had this small area of single prints and this 1 hour gap that got dipped into. But basically what we were looking at was, here's your range, okay, range, then you have your deviation, and then we're looking at the expansion, okay? And that is what we've had. And it has come into what was, first of all, previous week highs. So of course we had our Monday open last week. We put in a little high before a big drop down. Price this morning, taking out those Monday highs, and then also coming into what is the next 4 hour gap on the chart. So we had this one here, which had been chopping around, rejecting, came up into it overnight. And now this is the reason why another reason why I believe this would happen is because it's rejected once, like, I mean, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, like 15 candles that were holding within this 4 hour gap here, but not being able to break through it. And because liquidity is lower at the weekend, and there's less orders in the books, then it's going to be much easier to push through this on potentially lower volume over the weekend, which is precisely what we have seen. Okay, so those typical Sunday night, Sunday afternoon pumps that we've seen quite often recently, there is a reason why they happen at the weekend, because there's less liquidity. And this is why we're expecting the breakout to happen at that time, because there's also a time factor with it. There were fib times coming up on these very days, and also it was a quarterly, monthly close, and we go into what is now the second half of this year, which is when I believe the next stage of the bull run starts to build some momentum once again here. So if we're looking to level, this is obviously the next important level of resistance right now. So we've got another gap here. What we would like to see hold right now is what we have below. If monthly open can hold, great. Okay, let's see if this can squeeze up and we'll go level to level again. But we are still just going level to level. We had this range here. We're now looking at potential for this range here. Maybe you get another deviation and you do something like this, and you just start to get those like small staircases higher before we eventually have the opportunity maybe to squeeze towards that 67. There are some other levels that I think are quite important on the chart, and that is the weekend highs that we had on the the 22nd and 23rd of June. Both of these have poor highs, so I'll show this on the TPO in a moment, but both of these have poor highs, and I do believe that if we can hold within this range here, where we are right now, then there's a very high probability that we can squeeze through, take those weekend highs, then start to work on the gaps and the imbalances that we have higher up. Now, that then takes us into more of a kind of macro thing, where we're looking at this full range POC. You've had this consolidation outside of value area. We're now maybe seeing this acceptance within value area. It's still early stages, right? Okay, it's natural that you see a corrective move from this. But what we've seen, of course, with all these moves up so far is they have had full retraces. And this is the first time where we've had a bounce that hasn't fully retraced. And then we've got some continuation in the opposite direction to start to break and change that market structure. Now, where you actually look at the trend overall, okay, we are still in the trend of there's your high, there's your low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, still a lower high. All right, that is the high that took the low, or took this low. And then this is all internal, what we're doing right here. This is all internal. So it's very natural that you're going to see a bounce to come and correct a lot of this. But now what we have to see is if it can, you've clearly slowed the momentum to the downside so that the sell side momentum has stalled. And when you see this expansion away from the trend, away from VWAP out, like we had that big expansion, if you don't continue to accelerate downwards, then you are going to get that just typical mean reversion almost of just coming back into balance, which is what we have seen so far. So price is just coming back into balance, starting to cool off again for potentially either the next leg lower, in which case you would look to basically lose that value area again, and then we're looking for another leg lower, or we continue to see this float up and start to correct stuff. Even if we are going to see that continuation lower, I still believe that a move up towards that 67k could be quite likely here. So we'll see how this holds. It's been a really nice move. I think this was relatively easy to predict and relatively easy to trade. It would have been highly unusual for it to have continued lower, especially when it had already expanded and not got that immediate aggression again to the downside. So it's very likely we were going to see this move up, which made it pretty simple to open those long positions. But now is an area in which you need to be taking profit because we still do have this higher time frame downtrend on the 4 hour that is continuing to play out. Now, some other interesting things here. When you look at the VWAP, I don't want to make this chart too messy, but this is kind of what I mean. We'd had this VWAP and just these continuous tests back into the VWAP, and then slowly starting to extend away from it. And then you had this move that extended outside your standard deviation, so outside of value for the trend down. We then see that price managed to get itself back inside of value here with the shaded area. And now we're looking for this rotation back in towards what is the POC of the trend, which is essentially the VWAP here as well. So similar kind of situation, looking for that mean reversion play, but this has been certainly a big take profit level if you had been long from last week, because what we saw last week, of course, rejecting a number of times from this 4 hour zone before we managed to break higher, and we're probably looking at like a similar situation here. Now, maybe I'll do this as more of a video going over like the quarterly and everything, as a kind of different video, but there's something interesting that I would like I know I've done the lower timeframes and then going on to the higher timeframes again, but I'm covering what I think is important first of all. From the macro, we have had the first, I guess, essentially like quarterly test of a previous high. So here we can see we had that break above, and this was confirming the highest ever quarterly close, highest ever monthly close on Bitcoin back in back at the beginning of the year, essentially. And then we've seen that test back into it, that April candle up until the end of June, that quarterly test back in towards these previous highs. And this is something very similar to what happened on the NASDAQ, where we had a break and a back test. So once we broke those previous all-time highs from back in 2021, okay, you had an expansion higher, and then you came in to back test that before then what we are seeing now as being some kind of continuation. I actually need to bring this onto the actual NASDAQ chart because it's clearer on here. where you got the index. And you can see, if I just move this into log scale, then yeah, here's your break of the highs. All right, you then have this quarterly open and like close above. You come back in and you back test, and now we're seeing again here when we're going to start a new day today, potential like continuation from this and the start of a new trend. So Bitcoin doing a very similar thing, right? It had the break above all-time highs. It's coming back in to correct that, to test the old quarterly level, and now maybe we're starting to see this expansion. So could this be a sign of what we see next from Bitcoin, where maybe we're around about, I'll take it down another level here, maybe we're about here on the chart, lagging. All right, break above all-time high, you correct, test the quarterly level, and then we're getting some expansion now. There is potential. We have seen that legacy markets have had that expansion to the upside, and Bitcoin is just lagging basically a few months behind that, but a very, very similar cycle starting to play out there. So it'll be interesting to see, now that we have had that backtest, if this can start to, there's your quarterly level, there's your backtest, can this start to get some expansion once again here. What else do we have? If we have a look at, we can just bring it over onto this. The ETFs, okay, were pretty much, again, flat. Last week there was some small inflows, which is to be expected. We take a look at the CVD, and this was actually more so, I'd say, yeah, you look at this chart here, and it does appear to be more so a perps-led rally. You had some spot selling over the weekend here, whereas perps were managing to hold up quite well, and then you got this rally. So not the strongest, not ideal. What you want to see, this could just have been a short squeeze to take out some of those like late short positions before getting that move higher. What I would like to see is spot start to maybe lead this a little bit higher at this stage. But yeah, it's a decent move nonetheless. It's nice that we've hit those profit levels, but yeah, not seeing that continuation from the spot charts right now, and not really seeing it holding and bidding into these levels of support at the moment. But early days. What else do we have? Order flow here. So this is where we had our aggregated net longs and net shorts, and we of course had a big drop down in net shorts last week, and a lot of shorts, net longs last week, a lot of shorts opening, starting to squeeze those, but nothing really too significant again here. We have the spot premium still, so that's still there. Obviously, it's very, very green day today. I don't really need to cover this. Lots of stuff is in the green. And then I'll just pop over onto XO, and we can have a quick look at those charts that are over here. So, oh, come on, let me grab this. There we go. Last week again, if we're just looking at the TPO, then of course we did have that move down. So this was on the Friday that came back. Now, your POC could have been a couple of different levels here. I was looking at a point of control from this Monday at, I think it was 60,280, which we had held on the subsequent day. But we can see here on that Friday afternoon, Friday evening, there was that drop down that basically cleared up. Like, so if this is where your point of control was showing, your time point of control, volume point of control from the big move down that we had on Monday at essentially like 60,000 even. So it was a backtest to 60K basically, wasn't it? I know there was single prints down there was a POC down there, but the backtest of 60K, cleaning up that only other point of control that we have on the chart. We got decent lows on that day, obviously, and on that day we did hit a naked point of control from all the way back here. We got to go all the way back over to the 2nd of May to get this POC, and where did we bounce from? Right off of it to the tick, and then again here you bounce off of that POC essentially to the tick, and now we're looking at maybe working on these highs above. Now we do have Sundays point of control. It is weekend, so I think if we combine these together, merge this one with this one, are you going to merge? No, it's just going to freeze on me. There we go. Now we merge. We have that weekend point of control at 60,980. And there's a high volume node here at 61,600. So either of those. God, this is slow this morning. There we go. 61,600. There is that Sunday point of control, and the 61K essentially being that weekend like composite that we have here. If there is to be a bit more of a drop down, I don't really want to see these levels tested again, to be honest. I mean, a move down towards 61,600 would be okay, but it would just have to bounce from that pretty quickly. And then we have other volume point and time point of control here at 64,340. Then you come up and take out these weekend highs, and then you're really looking a lot higher towards that 67K for the next levels on the chart here. So I probably need to wrap it up there, I think. I don't think there's too much more that I need to explain on these charts. I want to keep this fairly short. Like I say, with the big stuff of like it being a new quarter and analyzing the previous quarterly levels and everything like that, I think maybe that's another video in itself that I have to plan out a little bit more. But I think for an update for this morning, seeing where we're at, seeing where we could be headed next, this has probably been sufficient. So yeah, I really want to see this monthly level hold. Otherwise it is likely we see this test back in towards those points of control, retrace this whole move again, which is what we have been seeing more often than not. You really got to hold this 61,600 level essentially. So move back down in towards that to hold around there. There's that daily level down there. We've got this other gap. We just do not want to lose. You cannot lose this zone at this stage now. So maybe we have some kind of correction that takes us down into there and we get that continuation higher. But if you do start closing candles back below 61.6, then I think it's highly likely we go back down once again, and we're looking for a further expansion to the downside. So I'm fairly bullish. I think we can see higher. I do think we can see higher prices, but there's some things that we need to see before we can get that. First of all, we've got to see spots starting to come in. Maybe that happens around the New York Open. Okay, we've got a new quarter starting. There was always going to be profit taking on Friday because it was the last trading day of the quarter, the last trading day of the month, the last trading day of the week. There was a ton of stuff going on. So there's always going to be that profit taking. Now, do we start to see those inflows coming back in? When we look at the whole year as a plan, and you can refer back to the video that I made on the 1st of January of this year, we were expecting Q1 to be a decent markup, Q2 to be bearish, Q3 and 4 to be the real expansive time. So are we going to start to see that straight away, or do we need a bit more consolidation before we see that big last push of this bull run for this year, which I'm very confident is going to happen? It's just a matter of when at this stage. Are we going to do it straight away, or are we going to continue to consolidate, maybe drop a little bit lower before we see that big markup as we go into like the latter stages of the second half of this year? So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Click the like button, hit subscribe if you've not done so already, and I'll see you in the next update tomorrow. Cheers. Bye bye.